Hello everybody and welcome to Nathan on Shuffle and to my latest episode here. I'm really excited to do this. I wasn't sure I was going to do an episode like this, but I thought it would be fun to check in at the halfway point of the year and tell you guys what I consider to be the best 20 albums of the year so far. Of course, as usual, it's only my opinion, so don't take it personal. This isn't like the be-all end-all of what should be considered the best of the best. It's just the ones that have stuck with me throughout this first half of the year, the albums, frankly, that I've been listening to the most and just have been continuously enjoying throughout these first 6 months. So a lot of my fellow YouTuber friends have done their lists, and I just wanted to contribute mine, and hopefully you guys will enjoy getting a look into my musical tastes and hopefully get some cool recommendations of stuff that you may not have known about or forgot about because it came out a little earlier in the year. Most of these I've done a review of, and I'll try to link those in the description so you can check out a full review if you're curious about this album in particular. A couple of them are new that I haven't talked about for various reasons. So, and we're going to start at number 20 with one of those. I'll probably go through 20 through 11 maybe fairly quickly and then spend more time on the top 10. But I wanted to give a full rounded list, and I thought this going from 20 to 1 would be fun and showcase like the wider range of my taste this year. So at number 20, a really interesting one that I haven't talked yet about on the channel is the album by Willow called Empathogen. This is more in the pop world, not really in the prog spectrum, so it's a little bit off the beaten path for me and what I typically talk about on the channel. But Willow is an interesting artist who before has been much more kind of in the standard pop world, as far as I know. I'm not very familiar with her catalog and her work. But this album, Empathogen, is really more in the jazz space, kind of contemporary jazz, a little bit of, unconventional time signatures and really creative, interesting things that she's doing with her vocal talent. And I just really adore it. I think it's just a fabulous record that showcases some real soul and some real heart and has a really nice jazz vibe to it. Symptoms of Life is one of my favorite tracks of the year. I think it's just brilliant. And if more pop music was like this, I think I'd be a bigger fan of modern pop music. So this really gave me hope for the modern pop landscape, and hopefully there's more releases like this in the near future. Number 19 is Return to the Earth and their album Stalagmite Steeple. A fabulous newer album, more in the atmospheric kind of Pink Floyd type vein, with some really David Gilmour-esque guitar solos and beautiful vocals, talking a lot about the COVID pandemic and some of the after effects of the lockdown period and things like that. So it's very emotional, very meaningful, some really great lyrical content, and it's just beautiful soundscapes, and I just really fell in love with this one. Even though it's not typically totally my bag, sometimes this kind of music is a little too mellow for me, but I really like what they did here, and I think it's just really fabulously done, so really good work there. At number 18, I have The Tangents to Follow Polaris. Really interesting album because Andy Tillison, who's the main helm of the Tangent, just decided to do all of the music himself. He does all of the instruments, all the singing, and even so far as did all the mixing, mastering, doing the artwork on the album, all of that stuff. So it's really a solo project in a lot of ways, but he still, because it's Tangent music, he decided to still keep it as the Tangent name. Some people are referring to it as the Tangent for One. But it's an incredible album. It's really interesting to see what one man can produce under his own name, and I think it's just fantastically done. It has all the hallmarks of what you'd expect from the Tangent, some jazzy bits, a lot of really cool epic prog. There's a big epic called The Anachronism that's really special. There's some lighter fare, there's some poppier kind of tunes as well that lean more into like that Steely Dan 70s jazz rock aesthetic, and he just does it expertly well. And I think there's so much great instrumentation and work, and you would never know that this is just a one-man project. It sounds full and playful and well done, and so it really impressed me, and I think it's one of the stronger later era Tangent works that have come out in the last several years. So really great project there. At number 17, another curveball a bit from what I usually feature on the channel. This is Aquilus and the album Bellum II. This is more in like the black metal, more darker vein, and I'm not typically a fan of dark black metal and, you know, those harsh vocals and death metal and all that kind of stuff is usually not my bag, but for some reason this connected with me because it feels more instrumental and more like you're viewing these different soundscapes and landscapes in the musical palette. There's some heavier, intense sections, certainly, and there's kind of this undercurrent of these harsh vocals throughout, but they're much more buried back in the mix, so it feels like just part of the pastiche of the music and lends itself to some of the more intense moments. But there's also some beautiful like folky moments. There's some beautiful like classical orchestration and things like that embedded into the sound. It reminds me a bit of some Opeth, like classic Opeth music, where it has that heavy harshness, but it's balanced really well with these lighter, folkier moments. And it just gives you this really great soundtrack through these different moods and moments. And I just am really a fan of what they've accomplished here. And I'm always putting things high on my list when they allow me to explore a genre I don't typically explore. You know, that's something that's really important to me, is something that opens my mind up to a different musical avenue, and that's what this did. So if you're scared of death metal, and if you're like me and don't really care for the harsh vocals and that turns you away, maybe experiment with this, see if it's something that might be more to your taste, because it was interesting to me, you know. I almost consider it more of an instrumental album, and the harsh vocals don't really cause too much of an issue for me, but your mileage may vary, so it may not be for everyone, but I really enjoyed that one. At number 16, I have Plantoid and the album Terrapath. Another cool, like, I believe it's a debut record by a young group of artists, really cool cover art, I really enjoy it. It's more in the kind of the jazzier vein. There's a bit of psych and, you know, lighter prog fare. There's some really cool jazzy guitar soloing, some Pink Floyd elements, I would say, as well. And it's just a really brilliant, fresh album. And what I like about it, and as you'll see through several of my picks on this list, I kind of like younger artists who are exploring these different prog elements, but still sticking and sounding fresh and modern, and still having this kind of indie vibe that works well in the modern music landscape at the same time. And I like that balance. You know, I like the old classic artists. I like the classic sound of progressive rock, but I also like artists that are bringing it into a new era and doing little things that are a bit different with it and making it sound more fresh and modern. And I think Plantoid have done that in a really excellent way. Really cool. If you like jazz rock, if you like psych and some of those elements, I think this should be a really fun one to check out. Number 15, more of a traditional symphonic progressive rock album, is the new one from Kipa. I'll just call it the Summer album because it has a really long name that's hard to pronounce, but it's a beautiful album. It's really long, and the reason it's not a little bit higher on the list is because I feel like it could probably be trimmed a little bit. It does take a while to get through, and there's a lot of passages that repeat and, you know, don't have as much original material. And a lot of people could argue that Kipa just sounds similar from album to album. It's hard to distinguish what their sound is, you know, differently from their previous albums. But I just think it's really expertly crafted. I think their production is really spot on. I think it sounds really fantastic. I think it has this positive bent that I'm really a fan of, and I love the playing style. I love these extended instrumental passages that just showcase a lot of quirky fun. I just really like this style. This is what I really grew up on in the world of progressive rock, and so it's always near and dear to my heart. Reminds me of like the classic Flower Kings albums that I was getting into as a teenager. So really a fan of this, and I think it's a really solid, strong album from them. Just another solid entry in their discography. Next at number 14, I have Sinister and their album Mostly Great Things. And to me, this like just goes back to simple, great rock and roll music. You know, there's a bit of a power pop element, a bit of a classic rock kind of element, like it could be plucked right out of the 70s, but it's just such a fun, breezy listen. It goes by quickly, and every track has something fun and interesting to it. There's some funkier moments, there's some just fun rock and roll moments, there's some poppier elements that they play with, but it's all grounded in kind of the 70s classic rock style, and I really enjoy it. I think it's a lot of fun to listen to, and just one to keep returning to. You know, a lot of these albums I place higher because I just would put it on repeat and just enjoy listening to it because it's a fun listen. So that's my number 14. At number 13, I have Baroque Project and Time Voyager, a fantastic recent album from this Italian prog band. It's a concept record, and once again it goes back into that like classic symphonic prog style. You hear bits of even like Styx and Kansas in the mix with some of the Yes elements and ELP and all these kinds of things. Some really great playing, some cool moments, some really great tracks on this one as well. I really love Propaganda, which showcases a different element to them with this like jazzy saxophone and more of like a Steely Dan jazz rock vibe. But they're willing to explore and experiment, and I think it works with the concept that they're time traveling through these different eras, and so you're hearing different musical soundscapes, but it's still all grounded in this classic symphonic prog style they're known for. There's one song that sounds almost like a pirate sea shanty kind of thing, which is a fun, different vibe for them. It's all just a really great journey of music, and I really enjoyed it as I listened through. And it continues to rise in my ranks, so it might even place it a bit higher on a year-end list, but we'll see how it goes as I listen to it more and more. Number 12 is Twice Around the Sun by Ugly. This one hit me by surprise, and they're calling this an EP, and I usually don't put EPs on my albums lists. But to me, it's about just as long as an album anyways. There's actually an album that's higher on my list that is shorter than this. So to me, it's practically a full length, and I think it's really brilliant music. The opening track really always blows me away because it has this a cappella opening that reminds me of like Madrigal Gentle Giant style, and then it goes into some quirky instrumentation. They blend kind of this classic prog sound that you'd hear from like a band like Gentle Giant, but in a more modern aesthetic, kind of like Black Country New Road and Black Midi, doing this more post-punk style in a lot of ways, but keeping it more folky and grounded in this kind of madrigal style at the same time. So it's just a fascinating blend of old and new that I think they pull off really fantastically well. One of the best of this kind of post-punk era that I've been listening to and enjoying. And I like listening to this style because it's, to me, kind of showcasing what might be happening in the genre in the future. And I think it's really fascinating and something that I plan to follow and enjoy as I continue listening to them. All right, next at number 11, I've got Mariana Simkina and her album Siren. This is a fantastic, folky, atmospheric type album. Her vocals are just fantastic. She's one half of the I Am the Morning duo, which is a Russian outfit. So this is dealing a lot with her leaving Russia and moving to a new area and all the kind of conflicts that happened through that situation. But there's some excellent guests on this material as well, some great vocalists who lend their hand, and it's just beautiful music that incorporates some like orchestral elements, some beautiful folky acoustic guitars, and I just found it really captivating. And even though it's a bit more low-key than my typical things that I like to listen to, I think it's just beautifully done. I like music that's just lush and arranged really well and has all these moments that you can grab hold of and just feel the beauty and feel the emotion and the passion of the singer, and I feel like that happens in spades on this record. So really fantastic job from Mariana, who did a bit of a Kickstarter campaign to release this one, and I think it went off pretty successfully, and I would strongly recommend it for you guys to listen to. All right, entering into our top 10. Of course, I can't have a top 10 without a Neil Morse related release. So at number 10, I have Neil Morse's The Restoration, Joseph Part 2. This is his continuation from last year's Joseph album, which tells the story, of course, of like Joseph in the Technicolor Dreamcoat from the Old Testament of the Bible. And it's more in his kind of musical theater style, which isn't really my favorite thing. I famously did not really care for Jesus Christ the Exorcist because of this. But I feel like The Restoration brings together his two worlds of like that classic progressive rock that he's known for, but also adding in some of those like musical theater elements with multiple singers and some more dramatic storytelling moments, and blends them in a way that's palatable for me. And I feel like this album makes me appreciate Joseph Part 1 even more because it brings the story to a close. It reprises a lot of moments from Joseph Part 1 in a really fascinating, cool way. And he incorporates a lot of the musical elements that he's known for from throughout his catalog. You know, he has kind of that Latin flavor section. He has like these a cappella gentle giant vocals that come about in different sections. Just some really cool funky bits and jazzy moments and rockin' moments. It's just all there in spades, and a lot of cool performances. Doesn't make it higher just because, like I said, the musical theater-ness of it makes it a little bit cheesy in my eyes, and I feel like it's a bit overlong. It probably could be trimmed a little bit. Sometimes it's a big project to listen through in one go. But that being said, there's just a lot of fabulous music on display that I really am in love with, and I think he did a great job. I prefer the Neil Morse band stuff because it's more traditional progressive rock, but I respect what he's doing here, and it's a good kind of placeholder for what I hope will be a future like full-on prog concept album that he might have up his sleeve. So number 9, I have Caligulas Horse and their album Charcoal Grace. This one surprised me this year. I wasn't really a fan of Caligulas Horse until this record came out. Not that I didn't care for them, but just I didn't know about them very well. I didn't really dive into their catalog. And this proved to be a really great album. I really love their brand of progressive metal. I'm a huge fan of Haken, as many of you know, and I think they embody some of that like modern progressive metal spirit that Haken does, but do it in a more emotional, more straightforward way. They don't have all the kind of quirkiness that Haken does, and don't really bring in all these different prog elements like they do, but I think it's just really beautifully constructed. There's a lot of emotional moments. I love Jim Gray's vocals, and I love the guitar lines, and it just all comes together in a great way. There's power and beauty, and just some of these tracks have really stuck with me through the year. I really enjoy this record quite a bit, and it opened my mind to another band that I previously hadn't heard of, and I am excited to delve into their back catalog because I hear from some people's opinions who I trust that they have even better records in their back catalog. But I just really love their blend of progressive metal. I think it's expertly crafted. I think it feels very mature, and I just really like every piece on this record. The big epic suite in the middle, but all of the tracks surrounding it are also beautifully constructed. There's some moments that are more lighter, more ballad-esque, but bring that powerful emotion that they're known for, and I just really appreciate and love it. I just think it's a really solid release and deserves its spot here. At number 8, I have Professor Caffeine and the Insecurities and their self-titled record from this year. Fantastic new discovery for me. This is a band I had absolutely no idea existed, and they kind of occupy this space. You know, you could think of like Coheed and Cambria mixed with Thank You Scientist is how I think I branded it when I was explaining it to people. But they also have a little bit of this kind of jam band like Humphreys McGee type of energy, Squeaky Feet, you know, bands like that. So if you meld those kind of things together, you get a band that's really fascinating. I like how they blend different styles. You know, you'll hear something that's a lot more poppy in the middle of the record, but then they're able to also go hard and heavy. They have like a prog metal instrumental track that's really wonderfully executed. And I just really like their style and sound. They have a good penchant for strong melodies, and they're able to really showcase some strong playing. And it just all culminated in a record that I thought was really fun to listen to. You know, it goes through a lot of different types of things, which is one of the things I really love in music, is when bands are able to tackle different sorts of genres, different sorts of moods in one album, and make it all work together as a cohesive project. And I think they did that on this record. Really fabulous release that I recommend to anyone. Number 7 is and their album Collapse the Wave. One of the strongest albums that has come up with. They're one of my favorite bands, and they have been for a long time, since like 2004. I really love their catalog. They're from the US, from New York area, I believe. And they're just one of the most underrated, brilliant prog bands, in my opinion. And I think this album showcases why. They bring this like classic prog aesthetic to their sound. You can hear little bits of like Yes and ELP and all of these other artists. Genesis, obviously. A little bit of maybe Gentle Giant in there. But they bring their own stamp to it. They have definitely their own sound and aesthetic, and they have this quirky kind of style that I really love. They have these vocal blends that I think are really fantastic. They have female vocals blended with male vocals, and it just all makes for a seamless connection. They're able to dip their toes a little bit into some poppier, more melodic type things, but also things that are super proggy and quirky and like that complex Gentle Giant-y type sound. They're also able to do things a bit in a jazzier realm, and I just think they really showcase their diversity and their quality on this record, and it just sounds fantastic to me, and it keeps rising up my ranks. This is another one. It's a fairly recent release, so it might raise up even higher by the end of the year, but I'm really enjoying it and really love what they've crafted here, so it's definitely a favorite. Next at number 6 is an album that is new to me. It's one of those that I placed highly because it introduced me to a new style of music that I typically don't gravitate towards. This is Sleep Makes Waves and their album It's Here But I Have No Names For It. Just fabulous instrumental post-rock sound, but I always think of post-rock as like very monotonous and very like atmospheric and just very light and fluffy kind of thing, but they bring a lot of heft to it. They bring a lot of weight and this like hard rock energy to their post-rock sound, which I really thought was a cool balance. There's light vocals in different sections, but for the most part it's mostly instrumental work, and I think it's just so hard-hitting. It sounds so brilliantly produced. It's just like ear candy when you put it on. It just really envelops you in their sound, and it's just so cool to just like let these pieces wash over you and take you to these different landscapes and these different identities, and each piece on the album kind of gives you a different flavor of their sound, but all grounded in this post-rock aesthetic. I think it's really brilliant. They have some great guitar work, some cool synth moments, and I think it's just a really cool achievement and showcasing a genre that I typically don't listen to very much. I'm not usually a fan of post-rock, but I think this is the most brilliant post-rock album I've heard, at least on my short journey into this genre. So really fantastic record and deserves a spot on my top 10 here. At number 5, I have Azure and their album Femme. This is another interesting release that I had to put high because of the ambition. It's like a double album, a concept album. It's basically like a D&D campaign set to prog music, very much in line with some of the more modern progressive rock indie style, kind of like the Deer Hunter, Thank You Scientists, bands like that. But they bring their own unique flair to it, and they bring a bit of maybe a more metal aesthetic to the table. I think I hear a bit of like Haken in their makes as well, and maybe not everything works. You could argue it's a bit overlong, and there's sections that don't quite hit me quite as hard as others, but in general, I think it's just such a fantastic achievement. It really opened my ears to something a bit different. I think it's super unique and has some interesting elements. I like how they're able to allow the music to tell the story and to showcase some of these different elements of what these characters are going through, and I think it's really fantastically composed and thought through. I do wish it had some more like catchier moments. Like a lot of the moments are fun to listen to while I'm listening to the record, but then I don't really remember a lot of the big moments that I heard because they don't really stick in my brain quite so much. But it's such a fantastic, enjoyable experience while I'm listening that I can forgive that a bit. And I just think it's a really fun record that's worth hearing if you're a fan of progressive rock or progressive metal. It blurs those lines a little bit, but gives you a fantastic story to follow and some really fun, exciting moments that will bring a smile to your face as they did to me. So really cool one. Number 4, this one really rose up and up and up throughout the first half of the year, but I just listened to this so much I had to put it higher up on my list because of how much fun I had with this record. It's the Lemon Twigs, A Dream Is All We Know. I just adore this record. I can't help it. I know like some people could argue it's a bit derivative of like Beach Boys and Beatles. It doesn't really have any of that prog spirit that I tend to gravitate to. It's much more of just this 60s sunny pop aesthetic, but I just love it. It's just such a fun record to listen to. You can put this on at any time with anybody, and it's just going to be a fun experience. Like, it's a very universal album that I just can't imagine anyone who's a fan of music in general not loving because of just how just simple but fun and really well crafted it is. It's definitely more in the pop lane, but in that classic 60s era that I just really fall in love with. I grew up on the Beatles. That was how I really came into music. My dad's a major Beatles fanatic, and I just feel that in this music. I feel that like Revolver, Rubber Soul era of the Beatles mixed with some of the like Brian Wilson-esque Beach Boys stuff from like Pet Sounds era. And it's just a perfect blend of fun music that I just can't tire of. It's just fun. No matter how many times I listen to it, I just still have a big smile on my face and just can't help but enjoy the experience. So it has to be in my top here. But there's 3 records that I liked a little bit better. These top 3 are all like fantastic, maybe 10 out of 10 type albums for me. I really love these. At number 3 is Chyros and the album Mannequin. Just brilliant stuff from Chyros. This really rose them up to another level. I've been following them for many years, but this album really showcases their talent in a new and exciting way. They're able to blend this kind of newer prog aesthetic, like think about Frost and those types of bands, but brings in this like 80s synth type sound to it that really makes for an interesting combination, really fun to listen to. It has these really interesting poppier elements, but it never sacrifices the prog behind it. So it's fun to hear these like catchy, fun songs, but then hear and catch these earworms that are definitely not something you'd hear in a typical pop song, you know, these proggier moments. And they're able to go into these proggier instrumental moments as well. Esoterica is one of the biggest, like, just hits of the year. It's just such a fun song. If you feel like you're in like a disco club at moments, but then they bring in these quirkier, more interesting elements, and it just makes for like a fun experience. I just love the whole album. I think it's just totally a blast to listen to once again. And it blends elements like that I love personally. You know, I love the big heavy prog of bands like Frost. And so to blend that with like this cool, quirky, synthy 80s music that I really love as well, that brings kind of a funkiness, brings a different edge to it. They even bring maybe a bit of like New Jack Swing into the equation. With Ghosts of You. It's just a really cool blend of different styles in a melting pot to make a really fun listening experience. And that's what I enjoy more than anything else, is a fun listening experience that takes elements from several different things and melds them into something really fun. Number 2 is Big Big Train, The Likes of Us. Absolutely fantastic record. Beautiful. I just really appreciate that the band carried forward after such a devastating loss of David Lungden, who was their main vocalist previously. So this was a bit of a rebirth of the band, and so I think there was a lot at stake here, and I think they really embraced this opportunity and crafted something absolutely brilliant with Alberto Bravin as their new lead singer. And you know, he's doing so much more than just being the lead singer. He does a lot of the instrumentation. He wrote some of the tracks here. I think he helped even in like the mixing process. Just a fantastic individual who's brought so much spirit and heart to the group. Saw them live on Cruise to the Edge, so maybe I'm a bit biased, but I just thought they were perfect. Hearing Love is the Light on Cruise to the Edge was just a magical moment. I think Alberto Bravin was just a fantastic frontman and brought all the energy and the heart that you'd expect from a fantastic frontman. And just there's so many beautiful moments. Beneath the Mass is just one of the most classic, beautiful, epic Big Big Train moments. I absolutely adore it. And I just love some of the closing numbers that are more pastoral, more like Genesis feel. And I love the closer, Last 11, which they did a fabulous newer version of with this really beautiful orchestrated opening. And I just really love the record. I think it showcases a new side to the band, showcases some added energy. And yeah, it's not quite David Lungden style Big Big Train that I think threw a lot of people off, but it's just an expertly crafted album by a band that's one of the best in the business, that's continuing forward and making the most out of their situation. And I just wish them the best of luck moving forward. I think this is a brilliant record and one that will be talked about in the future. So brilliant. Love it. Was almost my number 1. But one other album I've just listened to a bit more this year and just am a bit more obsessed with. And that is Dirt Poor Robin's Firebird. I don't know why, but this album has just like really sunk its claws into my brain, and I just can't help but listen to it on repeat and just continually be amazed by the sounds on board. And once again, it's not your traditional progressive rock. It's, you know, maybe you could call it more art rock or theatrical rock, but it tells this concept story and has these really catchy, fun, interesting songs that are layered, that have a lot of elements to them. It's a husband-wife duo that do all this music and who trade off singing as well, and both incredible vocalists. And there's just some really fun moments. There's some really heartfelt moments. Talks a lot about some really relevant type items to our world today, about bringing back some art and beauty into our world and trying to become more human. I just love some of the funkier moments, some of the fun tracks like Holy Roller and Goodbye to Yesterday. Just really fantastic, almost power pop mentality. They just have a real fun flair to them. They dip their toes into vaudeville and like older style music as well. Maybe not so much on this release. This is much more in kind of this 80s synth aesthetic, but I just find that they really inhabit these interesting landscapes, make a sound that's all their own, that's identifiable as them, and just craft expert songs that are just fun to listen to, really beautiful, have hooks that you remember, and it's just everything I want in music. So I'm a really big fan of this. I think Dirtpool Robin's really knocked it out of the park and did something really special here that just hasn't left my brain. And that epic conclusion of the Firebird suite, leading into like this Firebird track, I think is one of the best endings of an album of this year. So I've really enjoyed that. So that's my top 20. So a little bit of variety there, some interesting things. Hopefully you guys will let me know in the comments the types of albums that you've been enjoying and give me your lists of your favorite albums of the year so far. This is a fun time to discover and enjoy new music. So, and sorry if your favorite album didn't make my list. It's probably right below it, and maybe over time I'll enjoy it even more and bump it up into the upper echelons of my list in future episodes. But thank you guys for listening. I hope you are enjoying your day, and hopefully this introduces you to some cool new music to go check out. I'll put a list in the description of the album so that you can refer to it if you didn't quite catch what an album was called or whatever. But thank you guys once again, and I'll hopefully catch you guys in a future episode. Bye, everybody.